Okay. So this presentation is going to be about the Buddhist councils. As I said, the councils were developed because the rules in Buddhism were changing. Some monks said, well, now that the Buddha is dead, we think that we can change some of the rules. I think they'll work better. And everybody, you'll find this in Buddhism everywhere. I mean, now we have thousands of types of Buddhism. I mean, everybody kind of has developed their own style. They'll say, well, I do this meditation that I learned from so-and-so. But, you know, I found that if I add a little bit of this, it works even better for me. And then the next person says, oh, I learned this from him, and now I'm going to add a little bit more to this. When I first started meditating, I was doing Vipassana, and I had just read a bunch on Scientology. And I thought, wow, if I just add Scientology and Vipassana, oh, I'm definitely going to have the way. Well, not so much. But these were why the Buddhist councils were developed. So let's get into this. So let's see, I talk about the Tipitaka. I think we've already talked about that, language of the Buddhists. Okay, the first council, we're going to be talking about the first council. Second one, the great schism that occurred, the origin of all of these different schools of Buddhism, because they came about as a result of the councils as time passed. The third council, and a few other things. Fourth council, and the fifth and sixth councils in Myanmar or Burma, these were done and organized by Mahasi Sayadaw, at least the sixth council. And U Silananda, who you just heard, was the questioner in the sixth council in Burma when this occurred. Okay. Now in India, and correct me if I'm wrong, any people that are from India, they actually go through some training about Buddhism. And it's a requirement for, I'm not sure what it is, whether it's citizenship or a kind of a test of something. But anyway, they've developed, this is developed by India on the Buddhist councils. It's a short video, and let's go ahead and watch this. Find it here. Oops.
Hello friends, welcome to Tricks. Buddhism and Jainism are very important chapters for both UPSC, SSC as well as state PSC level exams. So in this video, we will learn some important facts related to Buddhist councils. First Buddhist council was held in 400 BC under the patronage of King Ajatashatru, presided by Mahakashyapa in Rajgiri in the Satapani cave. In this council, Pitakas were consolidated. Pitakas means basket. The two disciples of Buddha, Anand and Upali, helped in the consolidation of Sutta Pitaka and Vinaya Pitaka. Sutta Pitaka contained the sayings of Buddha, while Vinaya Pitaka contained the monastic codes and disciplines. The codes and disciplines which needed to be followed by the monks who lived in viharas. Second Buddhist council held in 383 BC, and it was held to settle a dispute on Vinaya Pitaka. What was the dispute? There was dispute on the codes of Vinaya Pitaka, whether one should eat and go for asking alms, or one should drink sour milk after meals or not. These kind of codes which were established, there was dispute on that. The two subgroups who had the dispute were Sthavirvadins and Mahasangikas. Sthavirvadins were those who followed the teaching of elders. They wanted strict codes, but Mahasangikas wanted some relaxation, some relaxed code. They did not want any reform which would further make the codes more strict. So there was a dispute between Sthavirvadins and Mahasangikas. Mahasangikas then later on became extinct after Third Buddhist Council. Second Buddhist Council was held in Vaishali under the patronage of King Kala Ashoka and presidency of Sabakami However, this one I feel is disputed because in old NCRT there is mentioned Chulavanga as chairman. If you can verify it, please mention that in the comment and I will add an annotation here. Third Buddhist Council held in 250 BC in Patliputra under the patronage of King Ashoka, and in this Buddhist council the decision was taken to send missionaries to different countries, and the president was Mugaliputta Tissa. And in this Buddhist council, Abhidham Pitaka was formed, and the two baskets became three baskets: Sut Pitaka, Vinay Pitaka, and Abhidham Pitaka, and this contained Buddhist philosophies. Then the fourth Buddhist council, held in 72 AD at Kundalwana in Kashmir, under the patronage of Kushana king Kanishka. Chairman was Vasumitra with Ashwaghosa as his deputy. And this council divided the Buddhism into two sects, Mahayana and Hinayana. Maha means higher vehicle, higher, and Yana means vehicle. The followers of Mahayana believed in heavenliness of Buddha. They wanted salvation through grace and help of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, and therefore idol worship was there. This kind of Buddhism became famous in northern regions, to the regions of Central Asia, Southeast Asia. The next was Hinayana. Hina means lesser and Yana again means vehicle. So they believed in salvation through meditation. There was no idol worship and they believed in original teachings of Buddha. For them, salvation was to come through individual meditation. This kind of Buddhism became famous in southern India and the southern region. There was another sect called Vajrayana which believed in salvation through magical powers. This was all about fourth Buddhist council. Fifth Buddhist council held in 1871 in Mandalay, Burma, present times Myanmar, under the king Mindan. And in this Buddhist council, recitation of all the Buddhist teachings were done to observe whether anything is altered or not, and it took almost 5 months to get completed. Sixth Buddhist council was called at Kaba Ai in Yangon, formerly Rangoon, in 1954 in Burma. The presidents were three elders, Mahasi Sayadaw Bhadanta and Vichitra Sarbhavimsa. It was to preserve the genuine Dhamma and Vinay Pitaka. So these were the 6 Buddhist councils about which we have to read for exam purposes. I have tried to make things simple for you so that during exams you can revise it in just 4 or 5 minutes. I will make a trick in the next video so that you will be able to remember the facts for multiple choice questions. Hope you like this video. Please subscribe to our channel and give a thumbs up if you like this video. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.
Okay, there's tricks for your exams for the Buddhist councils and Buddhist history. I found that on YouTube. I can't remember the test that it was that they're taking, but it was very strange.
It is for government jobs. David, it is for government jobs. The
Government
test is
jobs. Okay,
okay.
Thanks. All right. I mean, isn't that strange that India has got it?
Yeah, some people take history as the subject for government jobs.
Okay.
For them, this is important. Okay.
Interesting. Well, that's so. India is there is a lot of knowledge of Buddhism then, even though there's not so much Buddhism around. Would you say that?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. All right. So we're going to go over this just once more. So the first council, 400 BC. This was 90 days after the Buddha died. Supposedly he died in 483 BC, I think. The Buddhist canon as it exists today was settled at this council and preserved as an oral tradition. And there were each of the senior monks was given like part of the suttas to memorize and to recite. And then the chief questioner, or Mahakassapa, which is this, these are all kind of Mahayana type of spellings, I guess. He would call on them, and then they would come out and they would recite, and then all of the monks around would say, yes, that's correct, or no, that's not. Here's a slight correction here or there. And Ananda was the chief, well, actually, Ananda was the chief reciter because he heard everything that the Buddha said, and he had a photographic memory, and he could recite back anything he had ever heard. Yeah, so, and then the second council came along about 100 years later, and a schism occurs in which, and there's a big discussion at this council. And the reason for the council was because that there was some disagreements about what rules to put into place. We're not going to get into that right now, but we will later. And third council, Ashoka, the great king, who was a warrior, who became a follower of the Buddha after he was just so completely disturbed by all the people he had killed and all of the battles and all the blood that was spilled. He saw a Buddhist monk walking, and he said, that's the way to go. I'm going to become a Buddhist king. And at that time, the Abhidhamma came into play. That was added. Fourth council, Buddhism got divided into Mahayana and Hinayana. And Hinayana is a derogatory term that's used by the Mahayanas to describe the Hinayanas. They didn't think so much of the original elders of Buddhism, and the original teachings. They had their own teachings. They decided to change things to what they wanted to do. And so they kind of chided the Theravada sect and called them Hinayanas, or lesser vehicle. And so there was kind of a dispute between both of them there. So the first council, about 400 BC, according to the Chulavagga, the Book of Discipline, the Venerable Mahakassapa, on seeing an unhealthy trend among some monks immediately upon the parinibbana of the Buddha, decided to convene a council to compile the Dhamma and Vinaya, the doctrine and the discipline, to prevent the true doctrine from being submerged by false doctrines. The historic event took place at Rajagaha, Rajgir, 3 months after the Buddha's parinibbana, generally thought to be 483 BC. 500 of the leading arahats attended the first council, which lasted over 7 months outside the Satapani caves on top of Vibhara Hill in Rajagaha. I went to visit those caves, and unfortunately, we couldn't really get inside very much of it, but you can go and see where this first council was actually done. It's really not much there, but I guess 500 monks went in and sat around this meeting. Venerable Mahakassapa presided over the meeting. Venerable Upali was chosen to rehearse the Vinaya Pitaka, or basket of discipline, and he began each account with the words, Tena Samayina, the occasion was this, or I would say, or as we know it, thus have I heard. Yeah, and here are the caves. Oh, wow. Not very much here, but supposedly you could go way into the back of those caves. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was a like really big cave, and then over time it's collapsed in. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, here's another little video here.
Hi everyone, welcome to The Enthusiastic Buddhist. In this episode I want to talk about how the Buddha's teachings were recorded and what are considered to be some of the important Buddhist scriptures. So after the Buddha left this world and passed into Mahaparinirvana, which is a state completely free of clinging and characterized by the highest bliss and wisdom, his followers of monks came together in a place called Rajagaha, now known as Rajgir. Now that the Buddha was gone, they wanted to recollect and remember all the Buddha's teachings before any of it was forgotten, changed, or became corrupted. It was Mahakassapa, one of the Buddha's most distinguished disciples, that called this meeting. He summoned 500 arhats to participate in what became known as the First Buddhist Council. Now, arhats are people who have realized the Buddha's teachings and become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. They've attained nirvana and are free of all mental defilements and karma. They're not people with ordinary capacities, but people of extraordinary wisdom and abilities. Now, Ananda, who was the Buddha's loyal attendant throughout his whole life, was also summoned as one of the 500 arhats. However, it was said that he had not attained the state of an arhat before the meeting. This was because during the Buddha's life, he had little time to practice because he was always looking after the Buddha. But in the night before the meeting, as Ananda placed his head to his pillow to sleep, he also achieved the state of an arhat. So the following day, he was able to gather with the other 499 arhats. Now, Ananda had the power of perfect recall. He was able to repeat all the sutras or discourses that the Buddha had ever given. He could even recite them word for word. And since Ananda had always stayed by the Buddha's side as his attendant, he'd always been present for all the conversations that the Buddha had had with even small groups and individuals. So for the benefit of others, he was able to repeat all these conversations and teachings, and where it was possible, other monks verified what Ananda had told them, and all the teachings were then given the seal of approval by the council. There was also another monk named Upali, who was an expert on the rules of monks and nuns. He could recollect all the rules as well as all the stories behind why the rules were made. So Upali repeated all the teachings before the 500 arhats, and once these were heard, these were also approved by the council. Eventually, all the teachings were compiled systematically into what is called the Pali Canon or the Tripitaka. Tri means three and Pitaka means basket, so it literally means the three baskets. And the reason for this name is because it was made up of the three collections. The first collection is the Vinaya Pitaka. These are the precepts for both monks and nuns and the stories behind them, which is what the monk Upali recollected. And there are 3 books belonging to this collection. The second basket is the Sutra Pitaka, which contains all the discourses and popular teachings of the Buddha. It contains 5 volumes, also known as Nikayas, and these are the Digha Nikaya, which is the collection of long discourses, Majjhima Nikaya, the collection of middle-length discourses, Samyutta Nikaya, the kindred sayings, Anguttara Nikaya, the gradual collection, and the Khuddaka Nikaya, the compact discourses. The Khuddaka Nikaya is the largest volume and has 15 to 18 books. The reason for the difference in number is because some traditions, such as Burmese and Thai, will include some books but omit others. 2 of the most popular books in the Khuddaka Nikaya are the Dhammapada, which are short verses spoken by the Buddha on various occasions, and the Jataka, which are the stories that the Buddha told about his previous lives. Since there are 16 other books in the Khuddaka Nikaya, I'll list the other 16 on my website and provide you with some online links to some of them. Now, the third basket that makes up the Tripitaka is the Abhidhamma. These are defined as the higher teaching, and they include teachings on metaphysics, consciousness, and it details the process of birth and death. The Abhidhamma contains 7 books. It's said that the Buddha taught the essence of the Abhidhamma to Shariputra, who was one of the Buddha's foremost disciples, and Shariputra then codified it into his present form. Of all the Pitakas, the Abhidhamma is the most difficult to read and understand. It doesn't make for light reading. In fact, it's said that only some parts of the Abhidhamma were recited in the first Buddhist council. It wasn't until the third Buddhist council around 250 BC that it was compiled into the present form and accepted as the final Pitaka. So the Tripitaka is also known as the Pali Canon because it was written down in the Pali language, and these are the scriptures that are most revered and studied by the practitioners of Theravada Buddhism. It's said it took about 7 months for the completion of the first Buddhist council and for all the teachings to be recited and approved. These teachings were then divided into parts so that the 500 arhats were assigned the duty of remembering certain sections, which they would have then asked their disciples to memorize, and so on and so on. Therefore, the teachings were passed by a reliable oral tradition. Then later in the 1st century, during the 4th Buddhist Council, the teachings were written down on palm leaves and made into books. Now, if you're just starting out in Buddhism and you're interested in reading about the Buddhist teachings, generally the easiest and most popular reading would be the Dhammapada, or perhaps one of the Nikayas like the Majjhima Nikaya, which is the collection of middle-length discourses. But an even better introduction to Buddhism would perhaps be one of the many books written by modern-day Buddhist teachers who have the ability to extract the essence of the Buddhist teachings and transmit it in an everyday language that we can all understand. So to help you out, I've compiled a list of some great Buddhist books that you can find on my website under the suggested reading section. There are some books there that I'm sure you will love. So that concludes my talk on the Tripitaka and the First Buddhist Council. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel for future videos. Please like and comment if you found this video helpful. Go and check out the list of Buddhist books I recommended on my website, enthusiasticbuddhist.com, and comment below if you have any other suggestions for books that you think are great for beginners. So take care everyone, and I hope to see you in the next episode.
So there you go. All of that information within a few minutes. I hope you remember it all, but we'll be going over it a couple more times. It's a great channel. She has a lot of good information. The Enthusiastic Buddhist. It's from YouTube, so interesting stuff. And as far as the Abhidhamma, well, as she said, if Ananda didn't repeat it at the first council, and he repeated everything that the Buddha said, then it's not possible that the Buddha spoke the Abhidhamma. And they say a little bit of it was around at the first council, but of course, a little bit of it certainly is. I mean, it is related to Buddhism, so you could say that maybe some of these things the Buddha spoke, but not all of it. So that puts into question the entire thing. If everybody agrees that it wasn't even at the first council and they did speak everything the Buddha spoke. So it's a logic issue there. Okay, so what happened at the first council? I think she just went through some of this, but we'll go through it again. The first council, called the Council of the Rajagaha, was held 3 months after the Parinibbana under the sponsorship of King Ajatsu of Magadha during the 8th year of his reign. The proceedings achieved 4 results, namely the compilation of the Vinaya by Venerable Upali, the compilation of the Sutta Pitaka by Venerable Ananda, acknowledgement of wrongdoing by Venerable Ananda. He had to confess some things, I think pretty minor, but anyway, somebody had thought he had done something wrong. Imposition of a higher penalty on Venerable Chana. So there were a couple other things that kind of monks' business that they had to take care of in the first council that's not really widely talked about. It's more about putting the Tipitaka all together. But there were a few things. After the compilation of the doctrine and discipline for oral transmission, the senior monks or elders would have devised a system whereby certain monks in the same locality would be charged with the duty to memorize certain portions of the doctrine and discipline in Magadhi, and by combining all the portions memorized, the Sangha in that locality would be able to recite the whole doctrine and discipline together. This is confirmed by the Gopaka Moggallana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, in which the Venerable Ananda attributed the harmony of the Sangha to the fact that monks in each village observed the practice of assembling every fortnight to recite the Patimokkha. The second council, again, this happened about 100 years after the Buddha died. About a century after the Parinibbana, some shameless monks of the Vajan clan at Vesali were indulging in the 10 points, or the Dasa Vatuni, that were against the Vinaya, or rules of discipline. Venerable Yasa, son of Brahman Kakandaka and Vinaya expert from Kosambi, who was staying in the Kutagara hall at the Mahavana, saw them asking for money from the laity and objected to it. And even today now, in some places, you see monks asking for money. It's kind of a way to, it's kind of a scam, basically.
Yeah.
Still, the laity gave money to the monks, who divided the takings at the end of the day among themselves and gave Venerable Yasa his due share. It's like a cartel. When he refused to accept the money and reprimanded them, they passed a motion of censure against him, whereby he had to apologize to the laity for forbidding them to perform dana, or charity, to the Vajjan monks. Venerable Yasa, fully conversant with the law, demanded another monk to accompany him as a witness to the reconciliation with the laity of Vaisali, during which he defended his own view before the laity and won them over. When the accompanying monk reported the matter to the Vajjan monks, they charged Venerable Yasa with proclaiming a false doctrine to laymen and pronounced an act of suspension. Okay, we'll read that. Effectively expelling him from the Sangha. So he was tossed. So the 10 points that they were arguing about, or indulgences that Venerable Yasa openly declared as unlawful, were, okay, there's only going to be a lot of words in here, I'm not going to even say them. Singulona kappa. The custom of putting salt in a horn vessel in order to season unsalted foods when received. I mean, really, monks, you're supposed to accept what is given. You're going to take around salt shakers with you? I mean, really? Against Pachataya 38, which prohibits the storing of food unless used as medicine. Monks are not allowed to store food in their kutis or take it around with them. Number 2, the custom of taking the midday meal, even after the prescribed time, as long as the sun's shadow had not passed the meridian by more than 2 fingers' breadth, against the Pachataya 37, which prohibits eating afternoon and before dawn. So they didn't like this one. They wanted to be able to eat a little bit later. Number 3, the custom of going into the village after the meal and there eating again if invited, contrary to Pachataya 35, which prohibits overeating. So sometimes monks would be invited again to another place and they would accept that, or these monks say you should accept that and it's okay, but of course that's really just indulging in some greed here. The next one is the custom of holding, let's see, make sure I'm on the right thing here. Yeah, the 10 points. Okay. The custom of holding the Uposatha ceremony separately by monks dwelling in the same parish. In other words, you have 2 groups of monks and they do it separately. You don't want to do that. You want to do everything together. The carrying out of official acts by an incomplete chapter on the supposition that the consent of absent bhikkhus was obtained afterwards. So you always have to have a quorum. If you're doing business, you have to have everybody present. You can't assume that people will say that it's okay for whatever you did. Another one, it was permissible for a monk to do anything adopted as a practice by his preceptor, contrary to the rules. So if somebody decided to do something different than the actual rules, then they would just go ahead and do that. If their teacher said it was okay to do it, then they would do it. But of course, the teacher has to be following the rules as well. He can't make up his own rules. The Amatita kappa, the practice of drinking milk curds even after mealtime, against the Pachataya 35, which prohibits overeating. This is just simply more eating. Milk curds is like cottage cheese. And I guess some monks were eating that after the meal later in the day. And they're not supposed to be eating. The practice of drinking palm juice, which is fermenting. Of course, it turns into alcohol, but is not yet toddy. Pachitaya for 51. This is from the discipline, the books of the discipline. Pachitaya is like the third layer of rules down from the rules which toss you out, which is the parajika, and then the Sangha Desesa rules, which is 20 of those, which a meeting of the monks has to occur to figure out what to do with you. And then there's the Pachitaya rules, which are handled with certain penances and apologizing and telling monks about what you did. So this rule is drinking palm juice, which is starting to ferment and starting to become alcohol. And monks were saying, oh, that's okay. The next one was not so good. The practice of using mats to sit on, which were not of the prescribed size, if they were without fringe, contrary to Pachitaya 89, prohibiting the use of a fringed sitting cloth exceeding the prescribed size. So everything is very defined. Your robes and everything is very defined, how many you can have, how big they are. There's a sitting cloth that usually comes with a robe set. And you lay that out, and it's probably about, I don't know, 2 feet, 2.5 feet square. Okay, so, and then the big one, practice of accepting gold and silver, prohibited by the Nisagaya 18. That's actually a little bit more of a minor offense than the Pachitaya. But it's an offense involving forfeiture of the object relating to the offense. No, I'm not going to get into describing that. But basically, accepting gold and silver is not allowed by monks. And these monks said, well, I think it's okay. After the act of suspension was pronounced, Venerable Yasa went to Kosambi and sent messengers to the bhikkhus of the western country, of Avanti and of the southern country, to enlist their support to stop the deterioration of the religion and ensure the preservation of the Vinaya. Next, he went to the Ahanga hill in the upper Ganges to consult Venerable Subhuta Sanavasi of Mathura and team up with 60 bhikkhus from the western country and 88 from Avanti and the southern country. Venerable Subhuta Sanavasi advised them to consult Venerable Rivata of Saraya, a leading monk recognized for his piety and learning. Accompanied by him, they traveled to Saraya to meet Venerable Rivata, but he was aware of their mission and was on the way to Vaisali to meet them. Both parties finally met at Sahajati, where Venerable Yasa asked for his opinion regarding these 10 points. Each one of them was declared to be unlawful by Venerable Rivata. So these 10 desired changes in the rules, Venerable Rivata said no. Meanwhile, the Vajjan monks were following the developments of Venerable Yasa, and they too went to Sahajati to enlist the support of Venerable Rivata, hoping to win him over with presents, but he refused to accept them. So they induced his disciple Uttara to take up their cause, but that too failed. When the Sangha met together to decide on the matter, Venerable Rivata suggested that it should be settled at the place where the dispute originated. So the elders went to Vaisali, where the Sangha assembled to settle the dispute, but no progress was made due to much talk and fruitless discussion. So it was decided to settle the matter by referring it to a body of referees. Venerable Rivata chose 4 bhikkhus of the east and 4 of the west. The referees of the east were the Venerable Sabakami, Salha, and a few others. Those of the west were the Venerable Rivata, Subhuta Sanavasi, Yasa, and Sumana. Of the 8 6 were pupils of Venerable Ananda, who lived to 120 years old, while Venerable Vasabhaya and Sumana were pupils of Venerable Anuruddha, said to have lived to 150 years old. So he actually lived longer than Ananda. When the referees convened, so these are students of Arhats that they're convening, and the second council was Arhats also. The Arhats have not disappeared yet. When the referees convened, Venerable Sabakami, the most senior Arhat with 120 vasas, questioned by Venerable Ravata, adjudged the 10 points as unlawful according to the Vinaya. The same hearing was reenacted before the full assembly and the verdict unanimously upheld. So they met together, they looked at these 10 rules of keeping salt with you, gold and silver and various things, and they said no. According to the Mahavamsa, after settling this issue, Venerable Ravata chose 700 Arhats in order to hold a council to prevent the deterioration of the religion. The council spent 8 months rehearsing the Dhamma and Vinaya to ensure that the true doctrine was preserved and handed down to future generations. This is the second council. It's called the Yasatera Sanjiti, Elder Yasa's Rehearsal, because of the major role played by Elder Yasa in his zeal to safeguard the Vinaya. It was held at the Valukarama in Vasali, a century after the Parinibbana during the reign of King Kala Ashoka. So this is the second council. They decided whether these 10 differences in the rules were okay or not, and they decided they were not. And this council was made up of Arhats. So Arhats were around until the third council. According to the Mahavamsa, the Vajjan monks did not accept the verdict, but held an assembly of their own. So here's the Vajjan monks not accepting what the Arhats had just decided. They held an assembly of their own, attended by 10,000, calling it the Maha Sanjiti, Great Convocation, from which the sect derived its name, Maha Sangika. From then on, further schisms. Now, this is a schism in the order. From then on, further schisms led to the formation of different subsects. And in the course of time, 12 subsects arose from Theravada, while 6 issued from the Mahasangika, which is later to become the Mahayana. So we had 12 subsects from Theravada, and then 6 came out of the Mahayana. Important to note, the Mahasangika thumbed its nose at 700 Arhats and went their own way. That was my little note I put in here. So then we have another problem, another schism. This is the 5 theories of Mahadeva. According to the Sanskrit Pratimoksha Sutra of the Mahasangikas, these are the monks that split off, discovered by Rahula something in Tibet in 1934 and translated into English by Charles Prebish. All its Vinaya rules, except the 75 Sakaya rules of training for novices, 67 in the Mahasangika, are exactly the same as the Theravadan Vinaya. This means that the schism did not result from the differences in the Vinaya or the disciplinary code. According to the Samyutta school, the first schism took place a few decades after the second council. The founder of the Mahasangika was Bhadra, also known as Mahadeva, who came out with 5 theories concerning the Arhat. Now they're saying they have a new definition of what an Arhat is. According to the information collected by Waters, see Dutt, page 28, Mahadeva was the son of a Brahmin merchant of Mathura who was ordained Kukatarama in Pataliputra. By his zeal and abilities, he soon became head of the establishment, with the ruling king as his friend and patron. With the king's help, he was able to oust the senior Orthodox monks and put forward his 5 theories, namely, arhats are subject to lust when having an erotic dream. Ati-arahato raga ragoti. Number 2, this is what he's saying that arhats actually are versus what we think of them. Arhats may have residue of ignorance. Number 3, arhats may still have doubts. Number 4, arhats may be excelled because they may need others' help. Number 5, attainment of the path is accompanied by an exclamation as, "Oh!" Actually, I think it's, "Oh, wow," is what Bhante says. So you might agree with that. So these 5 things here are in disagreement with what we think of an arhat, that they're subject to lust, they still have ignorance, they have doubts, and they may need others' helps, and they proclaim something when they become an arhat. So they said that this is what we believe, and this is a big problem. So Theravada completely rejected the first theory, as the arhat has eradicated craving and ignorance in his mental continuum. So lust cannot arise even while asleep. The second, third, and fourth theories of Mahadeva maintain that, number 1, because an arhat has no knowledge of such things of others as the name, family, etc., he is liable to be ignorant. He is liable to get perplexed about facts concerning everyday life. He is liable to be surpassed in such knowledge by others because it comes to him, is explained and disclosed by others. Theravada rejected them because those things mentioned are conventional truths, having no bearing on the arhat's knowledge and attainment, since the arhat is absolutely free from delusive ignorance and skeptical doubt. So they're saying that arhats may not know everything about lay life and just mundane things, but that has nothing to do with being an arhat. It has to do with understanding the mind and being free from craving. So these other things you wouldn't have to know about, but you're still an arhat. On the 5th theory, Theravada maintained that speech was not involved in the attainment of path consciousness. In other words, you didn't exclaim, "Aho," when you attained arhat. Actually, nothing happened. You just had the experience. Obviously, the Theravada elders would not accept these heretical views. With the help of the king, Mahadeva convened a great assembly, the Mahasanjiti, reportedly consisting of arhats and non-arhats, that ratified his ideas and broke off from the original Sangha, effectively creating the first schism. The idea that arhats attended this Mahasanjiti appears far-fetched, since true arhats would certainly have disagreed with these heretical propositions. Yeah, I doubt arhats were in that meeting. In the Tipitaka, the Buddha is not distinguished from any other arhat, except his extraordinary genius to be able to discover the truths unaided, while others realize the truths by his guidance. Theravada has remained closer to this conception, though they later elevated his status to complete omniscience. Omniscience. Oh boy, omniscience. The Mahasandika, having downgraded the attainment of the arhat, found it desirable to make it clear a clear distinction in the case of the Buddha. Now, this is where in Mahayana there is a difference. It's said that there is a difference between arhats and Buddhas. Buddhas actually had a higher attainment, and those 5 things did not exist in Buddhas, and they become more like gods According to the Kathavatu, the Mahasanjikas held the view that a Buddha exists everywhere in all directions of the firmament. Its offshoot, the Andakas, even considered that a Buddha's daily habits, notably speech, was supramundane. Out of indiscriminate affection for the Buddha, some even held that the excreta of the Exalted One excelled all other odorous things. Can you imagine? Yet, in spite of their divergent views on the nature of the Buddha, the schismatic schools or Nikayas all aspired to the same goal, arhatship, as the ideal. So they still all saw arhatship as the goal. According to Warder, the Mahayana movement started with the appearance of suttas of anonymous and doubtful origin around the beginning of the Christian era in Andhra Pradesh in southern India. The Sadharma Pundarika, or Lotus of the Good Law, claimed that after attaining enlightenment, the Buddha decided to preach his doctrines in a modified form for the mediocre searchers of truth, to enable them to achieve their desired end. This modified teaching consists of the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and dependent origination, subjects of the first sermon. The Mahayana took this to mean that only the omniscient one could realize the highest truth, while his disciples, or savakas, who could only attain perfection by observing the instructions of the discourse, realized only the absence of individual soul, anatta, and not the non-existence or emptiness, the Dhamma Sunyata, according to Rhys Davies, 18. I think that's Arhatship is explicitly condemned and Bodhisattvaship held up as the goal at which every good Buddhist has to aim. And the whole exposition of this theory, so subversive of the original Buddhism, is actually placed in the mouth of Gautama himself. So the Mahayana took many of the teachings and created their own and said that being a bodhisattva was a higher goal than even arhatship. And it was condemned. Arhatship was condemned. That freeing all other beings was the goal of the greatest Buddhist practitioner. So things are changing here in the Mahayana world. Thus began the transformation of the Buddha and his Dhamma by Mahayanist logic and rationation that led step by step to Mahayana, from humanism and realization of the Four Noble Truths and Nibbana of the original teachers, to the supernaturalism and fantasy of the Mahayana suttas and the emptiness doctrine. You'll see emptiness everywhere. Everything's empty, empty, empty. In which long metaphysical and philosophical treatises in Sanskrit are created by scholars like Najaruna, Asavagosa, which are hardly intelligible to the common masses and are meant only for Sanskrit knowing scholars. Being well aware that the laity could hardly understand their abstract theories, the Mahayanist teachers created a new Mahayana pantheon in order to attract the masses to their great vehicle. According to Venerable Bhikkhu Kashapal, after a time in the Mahayana tradition, the philosophical speculations were symbolized by various bodhisattvas and the gods such as Avalokitesvara, bodhisattva of great compassion, Tara, goddess of mercy, Manjusri, bodhisattva of meditation, and Amitabha, Buddha of Sukhavati, or Western Paradise. So now you're hearing some of the Tibetan Buddhist figures, and Amitabha, which we were chanting in Japan at the Buddhist conference. Everybody's chanting Amitabha, Amitabha, Amitabha. So they're becoming like gods, and it's becoming more of a religion than a mental training. Okay. So the origin of the 18 Nikayas, this is Theravada. Now we're going to talk about how things split off in Theravada. The 18 Nikayas, or schools of Buddhism, arose sometime between 100 to 200 years after Parinibbana, sometime between the second and the third Buddhist councils. They were called Hinayana, mean or inferior vehicle, a contemptuous term tantamount to verbal abuse, coined by followers of Mahayana who wanted to exalt their own doctrines and belittle the earlier forms of Buddhism. It should be pointed out that the Buddha had never preached any superior or inferior vehicle to his disciples, only the Noble Eightfold Path to end suffering. Due to its derogatory nature, the term Hinayana should be avoided when referring to the Nikayas, or early schools of Buddhism. Now, of course, this is written by a Theravadan monk, so of course this is going to be their view, and I think it does agree with all of our view as Theravadan, or original, following the original teachings of the Buddha. So just point out some little tiny bit of bias, but I think it's proper. According to the Mahavamsa, after the Second Council, the Mahasangika seceded from the original Sangha and produced two schools. So after the Second Council, the schism occurred, the Great Schism, where you have Theravada and Mahayana. This happened, and it produced two schools, the Gakalika and number 3 something. From Gakalika arose 4 Panyati, and number 5 Bahulika. And from these, number 6, the Setya sect, making with Mahasanjika a total of 6. From the Theravada, 2 more groups seceded, namely the Mahamsaka and the Vajiputaka. The latter produced number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and later produced number 17, the Samkatika, and from this, Suttavada, number 18. So we'll learn what that is. So the Mahayana came out with 6, and the Theravada came out with 18 different sects. This is like a Christian church. You have the Methodist, you have the Presbyterian. They're all just slightly different in their beliefs. But overall, I mean, they all believe in God, and they all believe in Jesus Christ and all that kind of thing. The origin of the 18 Nikayas. In most of the cases, the difference between one school and another may be ascribed to geographical factors rather than doctrinal differences. The first serious differences before the schism found the Buddhists tending to separate into Western groups around the Great Triangle of Kosambi, Mathura, and Ujjani, and an Eastern group at Vaisali. In the case of Theravada, events of the Second Council showed that the monks of the West, especially of Kosambi and Avanti, dominated this group. The first group to secede, namely the Mahasanjikas, remained in around Pataliputra as their main center, while Theravada dominated at Avanti and spread rapidly into Maharashtra, Andhra, and down to the Chola country, as well as Ceylon, or as it is now, Sri Lanka. Soon after the Second Council, Mathura became the first center of the Sabitavans, and from there influence radiated all over northern India, particularly in Kashmir and Gandhara. And the Kasapiyas, in fact, were a group of Theravada cut off from the mainstream Theravada by the seceded Sabbativadins, and for a long time they maintained contact with their original base at Sanchi near Bhopal, India. More widespread were the Samhitas, who spread across Avanti, Gujarat to form their main center at Sindhu, while the Lokatavaradians branched out as far away as Bactria. And I hope you'll remember all of this, or none of it. The majority of the 18 Nikayas were short-lived, so they didn't last long, but some grew in strength and survived for several centuries. Notably, Theravada, Sabbativadin, Mahasangika, Sammitya, Lokatavaravadan, period. Xuanzang, who visited India in AD 629 to 645, estimated the Buddhist bhikkhus in India and the adjacent countries to the northwest at less than 200,000, 3/4 of whom belonged to the above 5 Nikayas, and the remaining quarter belonged to the Mahayana. Eventually, the Mahayana expanded northwards and eastwards to Central Asia and China, eclipsing the Nikayas. Of the remaining Nikayas, Theravada established itself in Sri Lanka and Burma and has survived this day after Buddhism disappeared from India following a Muslim conquest in the 12th century AD. All right, so this goes through the Mahayana branches. I'm not going to pronounce all these names, but I'll read here what the differences are in them. You can see all of these differences that started to pop up. Actually, this is not Mahayana, this is Theravada. Wait a minute. Oh, here's the, okay, there's the Theravada, and this is Mahayana. The doctrine of this school considered the world to be red hot with misery and devoid of happiness, a kukula due to the misunderstanding of the fire sermon. So this whole group was based on they thought there was a misunderstanding of the fire sermon, so they broke off. And then the next group, this school, was hardly known in later times and was probably reabsorbed in the Mahasanjika. So this is another group. They don't even describe what their beliefs were. Now, number 3, this school emphasized religious knowledge and erudition, scholarship, basically. Let's see, number 4 here. This school emphasized the Setya or the shrine worship. It is identified with the Lokatara Vadans because, okay, hold on a second. Okay, Rex, come on, let's go. Go ahead. I think Rex is tired of listening to all of this and he's decided to take a walk. Okay, so this school emphasized the shrine worship. It is identified with the Lokatara Vadans because of the Mahavatsu, which is an avowed text of the Lokatara Vadans, gives prominence to the worship of the stupas, basically. So they worshipped shrines and stupas. The next one, the Concept Panyati school. I don't know what that is. Number 6, it refers to schools of Andhra country, whose followers were called the East Cliffmen and Opposite Cliffmen, respectively, part of the Andaka schools. Who knows what that means? Okay, so here's the Theravada. Theravada means the doctrine of the elders and was the original Sangha from which other schools seceded. Its texts are written in Pali, recognized as the vernacular language used by the Buddha. The first school is the Mahisaka, named after the Mahisaka country, where this school was formed. Like Theravada, the Mahisaka adhere to the view that an arhat is beyond the reach of any seduction and cannot relapse. Okay, makes sense. Cannot become less. Some people say an arhat can actually lose their attainment, but that's not true. Number two, the second school, the Vatsiputriya, probably formed by the Vajjan monks who did not join the Mahasanjika, but branched out independently later. So the Vajjan monks who disagreed with the other ones with their 10 points, they left to create another school, which is Theravadan, basically. They prepared a new recension of the Abhidhamma based on the belief of the existence of personality, or the Pujala, a belief shared by the Samhitas. Both schools were also Pujalavadins. So they had a different view of the self. It wasn't necessarily a permanent self, but it's just a different look at the self. And you'll find that also later in some of these. And I think a lot of this came as a result of not meditating. People were thinking about things. They were analyzing and thinking that this should be like this and that should be like that. And they weren't actually looking at themselves to see how they really did work. Number three, the Dharma Ottaraya, Higher Dhamma School, an offshoot of the Vajraputikas, and were found in Aparanta on the east coast, Maharashtra at the port of Saparoka and places nearby. So this is the Higher Dhamma School. Doesn't really say much about it. Next one is Vajrayanika, the auspicious vehicle, an offshoot of another one. It's attributed to the doctrine of something, that the realization of the Four Noble Truths is acquired in segmentary order. So you realize each truth one by one, I guess is the entire the school here. Okay, we'll just leave that as it is. The next one is a school of 6 towns, an offshoot of the Vajraputaka. To them is attributed the doctrine dukkha darote. The utterance of the word dukkha leads to knowledge, or jnana. So I guess all you have to do is say dukkha and you become enlightened. I don't think that's true. So as you can see, these people were just really thinking a lot. Hold on for 1 second, I need to check something. Okay. Okay, another one is the Samhita, means the school of right view. It ascribes its origin to the Mahakachana, but Mahavamsa puts it as an offshoot of the Vajraputaka. The only remarkable doctrine of this one is that regarding the nature of the Pujala, or the so-called soul or self, which served as the carrier of the 5 khandhas or aggregates through births and rebirths of beings. Like the Sabbativadins, they also held that there is an antara bhava, an intermediate state between death of a being and its rebirth. So when you die, you know, some people say there's an intermediate state. For example, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that you go through, 49 different levels, or no, it's 49 days, that's right. And this is between your death and the next realm of existence. So that they thought there was some level like that, who knows? Okay, and more Theravada branches. The next one is Sabbativada, derived from Sabbaati, of everything exists, and refers to the doctrine of this school. They held almost the same views about the human life and the universe as Theravadins, in the non-existence of soul, in impermanence, and the law of karma. However, the Sabbativadins believed in the reality of the five aggregates that compose a being as against the Theravadins' view of their unreality. Thus, they admitted the reality of khandhas as existing in all times, past, present, and future. It's almost kind of a soul belief that basically you exist forever. But yeah. Number 8, started in Gujarat and Sindhu and named after the Greek missionary Dhammakarita or Dharmagupta, who was sent there after the Third Council. This explains why it was not mentioned in Kathavatu. Doesn't really say what it was about, though. The 9th one, named after the founder Kasabakota, who with Majjhima propagated Buddhism in the Himalayan region. It is identical with the Hammayavata schools. So many of these schools are just schools because they're in a certain region. And number 10, the Samkantika, or the Satrantika, this school denied the authority of Abhidhamma and admitted only that of the suttas. Sound familiar? Hence, they were closer to the Suttavadins, who followed the doctrine of the suttas. And so the Suttavadins are a school that believed only in the suttas and the Vinaya and disavowed the Abhidhamma. There were a couple other things they believed, but they were minor. So that's why we kind of consider ourselves Suttavadins. See if the other things are listed here. Nope. Suttavadins, also the two other things that Suttavadins believe that we don't, of course, don't believe, is that there could be 2 Buddhas at a time. That's not possible due based on the suttas. And also, they believed in another version of the self, the Pujala, that it was a self, but it was a self, but not a soul, but that it was permanent, but it wasn't. It did exist of moments that each moment that was separate, but it was in a sense permanent, and that it continued forever. So there's these beliefs that they take of soul and non-self, and they think about them a lot, and it turns into a very strange understanding of self and non-self. Really kind of, they have way too much time in their hands. Okay, so that was all from the Second Council. So we talked about the 10 points that they disagreed with, which started the whole Second Council movement. And then Mahadeva comes along and says, Arhats are like this, and they're not perfect. And that then led to the belief that really only the Buddha was fully enlightened by Mahayanas. And the Theravadins said, no, we think they are, the Arhats and the Buddha are the same attainment. So then we go another 150 years, or actually 136 years, I guess, to the Third Council. The Third Council was held 236 years after the Parinibbana during the reign of Emperor Ashoka, the Mauryan king who ruled India from Kashmir to the Ganges Valley and south almost to Madras, had become a Buddhist and was doing everything within his power to aid Buddhism. This royal patronage attracted thousands of heretics to don the yellow robe for worldly gain. Although they dwelt with the bhikkhus, yet they continued to preach their false doctrines and cause confusion in the religion. So Emperor Ashoka was the warrior who turned Buddhist, became a Buddhist king. And he provided very well for anybody who would become a monk. And then a lot of people decided that they could go and get meals and get taken care of, but not necessarily pay any attention to to Buddhism and then just go and teach people their own views. By reason of their great numbers and unruliness, the bhikkhus could not restrain them by the Vinaya rules, so that no upasana ceremony, fortnightly recitation of the Patimokkha, or the Paravanya invitation was held for 7 years. So there were no monks there were monks that wanted to do this and recite the rules, but there were so many monks that didn't want to do it, they couldn't do it. When Ashoka sent his minister in to investigate and settle this matter, the foolish official killed several monks. Hearing of the misdeed, Ashoka was filled with remorse, and doubts lingered in his mind whether he was responsible for the crime. He was told that the Arahat Moggalaputta Tissa, who was living in solitary retreat on the Aho Ganja mountain further up the Ganges, could resolve his doubt. Ashoka had to invite the Arahat 3 times before the latter came to Pataliputra. And as you might recall, the Buddha was always being asked his opinion about something, and many times he would say, no, I cannot answer that. And then after 3 times, he would finally answer it. And the answer would probably be something that the questioner really didn't want to hear, like his parents had just gone to hell or something like this. But once you ask 3 times, usually you're going to get the answer. And in this case, the Arahat came out of his place where he was living and decided to help resolve this. There he was received with great honor by the king, who accommodated him in the Asarakararama, and for 7 days the king received instructions at the feet of the Arahat. The bhikkhus were then tested on their views, and the heretics were expelled from the Sangha. The pure bhikkhus who remained performed the apostate ceremony after a lapse of 7 years. So they eliminated all the heretical monks from the Sangha that had gathered there. So they found the people and questioned them and questioned them on Dhamma, and if they didn't know anything about it, they were asked to leave. The Arahat Moggalaputta Tissa took the opportunity to hold the 3rd council in order to compile the true doctrine. 1,000 Arahats took part in the council held at the Asokarama in Pataliputra, modern Patna, in the 18th year of Ashoka's reign, 236 after the Parinibbana. Venerable Moggalaputta Tissa presided over the meeting, in which controversial doctrines of various Buddhist sects were examined and refuted, leading to the composition of the Kathavatu, Points of Controversy, one of the 7 books of the Abhidhamma. So there's one of the books of the Abhidhamma that clearly the Buddha didn't speak, because it was based on teachings that were written down based on the 3rd council of controversial doctrines of different sects. So that had nothing to do with Buddhism, other than the different opinions. The assembly took 9 months to rehearse the teaching, after which the Pali Tipitaka was compiled and closed for another 3rd time. So this is the 3rd council. And we're going to go through the 3rd council, and then we'll stop here. The 3rd council refuted and eliminated all the tendencies which were no longer regarded as consistent with the faith, and brought the Pali Canon to a close. However, its greatest achievement was the sending of missionaries to other countries to propagate the faith, because prior to this, Buddhism was basically a local religion, confined mainly to a few states of northern India. Thanks to the wisdom and foresight of Venerable Moggalaputta Tissa, the royal patronage of Emperor Ashoka, and the teams of highly dedicated missionaries, the Buddha Sasana had spread beyond the borders of its narrower home. Thus, when Buddhism disappeared from India for 600 years after the Muslim conquest during the 12th century, the light of the Dhamma still shone in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and other Theravada countries. It was basically pushed out of India, and where the Sasana had been founded. Today, we are witnessing a new phenomena whereby monks from other Buddhist countries are returning to India to revive the Buddha Sasana in its country of origin. And in a sense, that's what Bhante did, is he returned to India to teach the teachings from the original suttas. Strangely enough, a story in the Mahavamsa written during the 6th century AD tells us that the Venerable Moggalaputta Tissa was a Brahmin god called Tissa in his previous existence. At the time of the Second Council, the Arhats, foreseeing danger to the religion in the future, approached him for help as his lifespan in the Brahma realm was coming to an end. He consented to be born in the world of men in order to prevent the downfall of the Buddha's religion. Subsequent events appear to confirm the prophecy of the Arhats of the Second Council. Very interesting. And I think we're going to stop there because my voice is about gone. And I'm going to stop sharing. We'll see if anybody's left after all of that information has been read through. It looks like we have still a few people online. That's good to know. This is quite a long presentation, so we'll do another part of it another time.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. And any questions about, well, David's presentation is really nice, so I don't think we have, if any questions, I don't know, David can take any questions.
I don't think so. Because it's all there, it's all written down. And
yes.
I provided you with the PDF of the entire presentation, so you can read that on your own.
Yes.
I guess, Ken, if you can send that out to people.
Yep, I sent it out to the group in Telegram.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there for people to download. So I just want to remind one quick reminder before we close off, like we don't have any sitting or talk next week. And then after that, we will start on the 3rd. Was, for starting from New Year, we're starting back on the 3rd of January. Okay.
Okay.
And let's share. Oh,
David, the interview during the Zoom retreat.
Yes.
You said in the evening also there will be interview for North America. You said
there will be interviews from 2 to 4 p.m. Central Time. Just that's
okay.
the only time.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it matches with what you can do, then that's fine. But if it doesn't, then you probably won't be able to do the retreat.
Okay. Thank you.
And what I'll try to do right now is find that link to this Zoom retreat right now and put it in the chat. Let's see here. Okay, so the Zoom retreat listing's in the chat. If you want to take a look at that.
yeah. And again, if anyone wants to participate, a small dana for Mondays, like I wanted to do something special on the New Year's Day. So just send it either to me or David directly. That's fine. David will share more with us.
Oh, we send it on the New Year Day, right?
Yeah, like Monday's New Year's Day lunch. So something, set the tone, right tone for the new year.
Yeah, in terms of sending dana, you can just pick any kind of, if you look at our site, I think there's a selection in the donations for $1 or multiples of $1. So
Yeah.
if you want to send that, and just put a note for New Year's Day. And
New Year's Day. Yeah.
we'll
Then they
share
will.
merit.
All right.
And
And I don't think David will have a handy sharing merit. So maybe I'll just
well, let's
say
see.
it from
Here
yeah.
we go. Hold on a second.
All right.
Okay, here we go.
All right. Let's
May
go.
suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear
And the
struck
fearless
fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief. May all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Kin.
Thank you,
Welcome.
David.
All
Thank
right.
you, everyone. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.